On this Friday evening, good evening once again from our NBC News headquarters here in New York. We have what is being called a landmark development tonight as day 281 of the Trump administration comes to a close. CNN is reporting tonight that the first charges have been filed in the Mueller investigation. This means that a federal grand jury sitting in Washington to review the evidence has returned a charge or charges. They are further reporting tonight that the charges are still sealed by order of a federal judge, perhaps to be unsealed over the weekend, and the lawyers of those named will presumably be asked to turn their clients into law enforcement. CNN's further reporting that could come as early as Monday. This is obviously notable because this is an investigation into Russia collusion, and charges being filed would indicate that Robert Mueller believes someone has broken the law here. Without any delay, let's put this before our lead-off panel tonight. NBC News intelligence national security reporter Ken Dilanian, Matthew Mueller, former chief spokesman at the Department of Justice, now an NBC News justice and security analyst. Tamara Keith is with us, White House correspondent for National Public Radio. And Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at CIA, at the Pentagon, and notably former counsel to the House Intelligence Committee. Jeremy, I'll begin with you as the House counsel on this panel, at least. How unusual is this? We should note the Reuters news agency is confirming this CNN story, though, with a single source. How unusual is it that these charges, or this charge, this indictment under seal by order of a federal judge, the word of it has broken, though we don't know who, we don't know what possible charge or charges?
Well, if word came of it from the grand jury or from the government, that would violate the law. There are grand jury secrecy requirements. If it came, on the other hand, from a defendant or the defendant's counsel, that would not be unusual. So we don't know exactly the source of these stories. It's important to note, Brian, tonight, we don't know who is charged and we don't know what they are charged for. The fact that the indictments are sealed does not give us any indication into the substance of what Bob Mueller has convinced a grand jury to find probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. We don't know if he's charging multiple individuals, multiple defendants, or just a single person. And we don't know if it's for something directly kind of at the hot, molten core of this investigation, collusion, financial impropriety, or if it's something more tangential. For example, Mike Flynn's failure to register as a lobbyist for the Turkish government. We just don't know at this hour.
Jeremy, how about a little informed speculation? Are you curious at how early in the Mueller effort this is? He's been at this, what, 5 months? And does this tell you, does the timing tell you anything?
This is fast. I mean, he is moving with all deliberate speed. We know that. He has a large team of investigators, of prosecutors. He's got a lot of resources. But even for a large team, this kind of complex investigation, I would think would have taken a lot longer. So this seems to me like something that was sort of easily provable fast, like lying to a federal investigator when there was clear evidence that the individual was lying, or something involving a bank transaction where something was forged and it was easily provable that was a violation of federal law. Something more complicated about the conspiracy to affect the 2016 election, I would think that this is pretty fast to find criminal charges on that matter.
Ken Dilanian, same question.
Well, I would just point out that although Mueller has been in place for 6 months, the FBI investigation into some of these matters goes back a lot further than that, almost as long as a year in some cases. And so, but although I agree with Jeremy that in terms of the complex conspiracy of collusion or alleged collusion that Mueller's investigating, it's hard to imagine he's got any charges to bring on that score. But the idea of a lie to a federal investigator, that's a pretty straightforward crime. There's also issues about disclosure forms and, lobbying forms filled out incorrectly that we've long reported that Mueller's looking at in terms of Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn and Michael Flynn's son. And so it's not inconceivable. It wouldn't be terribly surprising if those kinds of charges were brought. I just think, a note of caution here, other than Reuters, no other major news organization has confirmed this story.
Yeah, we're trying to be cautious about that unless and until NBC News can confirm it ourselves. Matthew Mueller, there is the theory, of course, that an early charge in this case is someone you are looking to affect or flip, and that would indicate, I guess common sense would dictate that wouldn't be a minor charge, would it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, it's clear that Mueller has decided that he's not going to wait until the very end of this investigation and bring all the charges at once. That's often what you'll do in complex investigations like this. You'll collect all of the evidence, you'll take all the testimony in grand jury, you'll do all of your FBI interviews, and then you'll move at one time against everyone against whom you can bring charges. He decided not to do that. I don't think anyone should expect that these indictments are the end of this investigation. And so that means that either he has decided that, I think what that means is that he's either decided that the indictments he has brought now under seal, if this CNN report is right, are either tangential or somewhat unrelated to the core underlying claims he's investigating, whether there was collusion to affect the 2016 election, or it's someone that he's been putting pressure on already, and he just needs to do a little bit more. And he's going to, it's someone who he thinks, like a Paul Manafort, who was central to the campaign, has not been cooperative. He's now going to indict him, let him know we're willing to take this case to trial, and see if that doesn't get him to actually bend and start talking in exchange for a plea deal.
Tamara, you've been around long enough to know that it would be highly unlikely if this leak, this source came from the feds end of this, given Mueller's penchant for secrecy and discretion, given the fact that this was sealed by order of a federal judge.
Yeah, and Mueller's team have been pretty leak-free. They have been taking this very seriously and keeping things very much under control. They provided a no comment to NPR tonight when we sought comment on this. And I just want to say again that NPR has not confirmed this. NBC has not confirmed this. This is a couple of news organizations that are out there with it, and with blind sourcing. Sources briefed on the proceedings is the sourcing that we have, which could be anyone.
All right, Jeremy Bash, let's talk about the process. Remind the good folks watching tonight what happens in a grand jury. A prosecutor like Mueller or one of his chief deputies sits down with this group of citizens in a federal courthouse in Washington or wherever they're impaneled. They develop 2-3 days a week sometimes a relationship. They bring evidence and witnesses before the grand jury. Take it from there.
And then it's time for the grand jury to return a true bill, to return an indictment. And essentially the prosecutor lays out the proposed charges, puts them down on paper, and the grand jury has to vote. And if the majority of the grand jury finds that there is probable cause to believe that an offense against the United States, a criminal act, has occurred, they can return the indictment. However, according to DOJ practice, a prosecutor will not propose an indictment unless the prosecutor believes that he or she can prove beyond a reasonable doubt at a jury trial of the defendant's peers that, in fact, a crime has been committed. Once the indictment is returned, then it's really up to a discussion between the judge, the prosecutor, and the defense counsel as to how the defendant will turn himself in or herself in. Sometimes an arrest is made. Sometimes there's a negotiation to appear at the courthouse. Sometimes there's an early morning raid. There are a number of different permutations that we've seen. I think in this case, the fact that it's under seal doesn't tell us a lot. Other than that, they are not totally ready to have the defendant appear today. That might mean there are more than one defendant, and maybe one is not in town. They want them both to appear at the same time. It might just mean they're giving them the weekend. It might mean they want to have the element of surprise, and the defendant is not aware that he or she is about to be facing criminal charges.
Jeremy, let's point out that there is some discretion that enters into the argument here. The decision to give a heads up to that subject's lawyer. As you mentioned, the possibility to give them the weekend to get things in order. The determination about whether the subject, the target of the indictment, is a risk of flight. Are they likely to fly the country? And some of it is stylistic. To arrest and do what we've come to know as a perp walk, a handcuffed, potentially high-value target, or to have them in a civilized manner get driven and surrender to law enforcement.
Yeah, sealing an indictment is usually a tactic by the prosecution to retain the element of surprise, to not telegraph to the defendant or others that the prosecution is about to move against them. But it can also sometimes, as you know, Brian, be an accommodation to the defense counsel and the defendant to say, hey, look, we want to let you have your matters in order, and we don't want to tell the public before we've told you, so that you're prepared to meet the obligations of a defendant in this matter and not be caught off guard.